first afternoon in South Dakota. It's gonna be fun. We actually got 2 truckloads of guys on stands with us this trip. We're gonna have 2 cameramen and 4 shooters. So we're gonna designate, we're gonna put 2 guys on shotguns, 2 guys on rifles. Just primo conditions. Real cold, fresh snow. Not gonna get more than probably 20 degrees. The wind's not gonna blow a whole lot, so you would think that the coyotes would just be very active, wanting to come to the call. So we pulled down into these old corrals. We got prairie dog towns that kind of surround this river bottom. So about as ideal as you can get when it comes to cover, when it comes to habitat, food sources, whatnot. So we're gonna walk back in here probably 600 yards. It's dead calm, so I like to park and walk a little further in when it's dead calm, just to hopefully not spook out any coyotes. So we're gonna slip on in here, get down a little closer to the river bottom, where we can call this big flat, this big prairie dog town on the other side. So I'm gonna start off some lucky pecker, kind of non-aggressive, and then later in the stand we'll get kind of loud and more aggressive with fights and different things like that. I decided I'm gonna put the call clear down there on the frozen ice. So I walked down, set it out in the middle, and that way any coyote that comes to that edge has to come to the lip of that bank to look down in there, which is gonna give us a shot. There's no reason that coyote's gonna hang back. Coyotes are gonna be curious, they're gonna come to a vantage point. So I'm rolling through sounds, started off some lucky pecker. Anytime it's real calm and quiet like that and cold, you know, a higher pitched sound seems to be the ticket. So I go through lucky pecker 4 or 5 minutes, nothing shows up. So I decide to switch over to some pup distress, and it's just a few minutes into that, and hard to our left down the bank, exactly how we had planned it, this coyote popped up. Thick cover, thick brush, but it came just enough to that edge to look down at the call, and Josh had a clear lane right down the bank. Josh is using my Daniel fence, set up the Swagger bipod, and he'd never touched that gun until an hour before. He was able to make a quick adjustment on that coyote, squared up the crosshair 70 yards, boom, thumped the coyote right on the bank.
Shot, Josh.
In less than, you know, an hour or 2 into the hunt on a new property, we had a coyote in the truck.
Look at that.
Yeah, this is a little young male. There's an older coyote. Yeah, he's probably this year's pup. Yeah, little male. He's a nice coyote though, man. Nice coyote. Yeah, what was that? Probably 75 yards. So it's kind of cool. I always like to, kind of from where I'm at, you know, that coyote got to right here and he could look right over that bank. He could see the call. That's kind of why I had somebody set up here in case we had one come hard. But sometimes these younger coyotes, when you're playing those fights and things like that, they come to the call, they just don't want to. The big adult dominant coyotes will come bombing right in usually. But I was a little worried though. I saw that you had that little bit of brush right in front of you. But it was no problem. You kind of threaded it right through there.
Man, that was perfect. That was awesome.
Shows the versatility of those swaggers. So, you know, we're sitting on that bank and you were able to move. You had kind of logs to navigate and things, and you were able to move them and square it right up on him. All right, sun's a setting, man. I'm glad you shot it. That's a hell of a drag back to the truck.
Wait a second. I thought we said Sean was dragging if we got one.
So the unique dynamic of this hunt was, obviously I know how to hunt coyotes, but Josh doesn't, but he knew the ranch really well, and I didn't know the ranch. So I'm kind of picking Josh's brain, kind of how this thing lays out, and he starts telling me about these pockets of prairie dog towns that are scattered along this river. And he mentions one particular area that kind of catches my attention, and we decide to head there for the last stand of the day. So we're chasing daylight at this point. We get into the stand, the temperature's dropping. I think it was well below zero. My hands were freezing, but I knew we had just enough time to get a coyote called in. It was pretty wide open. We were looking out across a prairie dog town, you know, 600-700 yards. So I knew if any coyotes came in on this stand, they were gonna have to come from a long ways. So right off the bat, I get into some pup fighting, some coyote fighting, hoping to really trigger an aggressive response so the coyotes come to the call, you know, at a fast rate. We're not a few minutes into the stand, and Josh spots the coyote coming across the far end of the prairie dog town. Max, Now, generally speaking, if a coyote's making a straight line to the call, 99% of the time, I'll leave that same sound running. I'll leave it at the same volume. I'll just let it ride as long as that coyote's making ground and getting closer. But at any point, if that coyote starts veering off its approach and starts maybe wanting to circle downwind, you know, where it stops and hangs up a little bit, that's when I'll start looking to maybe switch up the sounds a little bit.
So he's circling downwind a little bit. I don't think he's coming right at the call.
So on this stand, we had plenty of coverage with Josh and I on the rifles. We put Luke down low, and I purposely put them down in a little low spot and had the call down in there just so that any coyotes that came across that prairie dog would have to come up over that lip to see the call, which would put them into shotgun range. But this coyote starts fading off to the right. He's kind of circling out, kind of heading downwind. We knew we weren't going to get the shotgun kill. So at that point, I'm just trying to make sure my fingers are warm enough to make the shot. I get moved over, I kind of anticipate where that coyote's gonna end up, and it was really cool to watch. That coyote could hear the sound, but he couldn't see the call, and he was hopping up in the air out there in the prairie dog town, trying to get that vantage point where he could see, but he couldn't. It just got to the point where I like, you know what, this coyote's not gonna come any closer. He was about 200 yards. It's time to get him stopped, and woo! Woo! And center the crosshairs, slow squeeze, and 2 coyotes in the last 2 stands of the first afternoon.
We just had to be a little patient with that coyote. Not every coyote's gonna come hard right at the call, and that was no exception. He just was making a circle on us, and anytime a coyote gets out there at 150 or 200 yards and starts paralleling your position, it's time just to get him stopped and shoot. You know, I didn't have to play the revolution very loud. I haven't played it more than about 16, which is half volume. When it's dead calm like this, that sound carries a long, long ways. So we still have a little bit of light left, even though it's about 16 minutes on stand. We have enough light to sit here maybe about 5 more minutes, so you never know.
Another great coyote, man.
Oh man, that was awesome.
You know, we almost had 2. I had about a 450-yard shot. You know, late season like this, sometimes you get the smart ones, and he circled out there, sat out there and howled at us. I underestimated the 5-mile-an-hour breeze we had, 223. You know, it doesn't cut the wind great, but I gave him about 4 inches of wind and needed to give him about 8, and he was sitting down, just barely missed him. But either way, man, 3 stands, 2 coyotes. Great start to the trip.
Can't ask for more than that, right?
Second morning, our expectations are high. We killed 2 coyotes in 3 stands the afternoon before. I get with Josh again. We start putting together a game plan on how we want to attack the remaining part of the ranch we had to hunt. It was one of those days where it seemed like if something bad was going to happen, you could just count on it. You know, we get back to the truck after the first stand of the morning. It's 12 below, and Josh's truck has a flat tire. So we have to spend 45 minutes messing with this tire. We get it plugged, we get some air back in it, we limp it back, we get it fixed up, we regroup, we head on out. We were grinding, we were making stands, we just weren't seeing any coyotes, and for whatever reason, it just was one of those days. Later in the day, I get my truck stuck. We were dipping and dodging snow drifts all day long. And I just got to the point where I wasn't paying attention enough, and I buried into a little low spot. Funny thing was, I was giving Josh and Luke some crap because the day before we got there, they had actually got his truck stuck, and I didn't think there was enough snow to get stuck. But so they had their good laugh at me finally. But they were going to hook the old Ford onto the Toyota and pull it out, and I said that just wasn't going to happen. And I got to digging and broke myself free and got out of there without being towed out. So. We kept grinding, and we got into the last stand of the day, and it was just an exceptional stand. We came off a high bank. We're calling over miles of river bottom. It started to spit some snow on us. We sat there 20, 25 minutes till we ran out of light, and nothing showed up. So as we're walking out of that stand, I asked Josh what we had going for the next day, and I said, you know what? I said, let's come back in here first stand of the morning and see if we can't kill this coyote in the same exact spot. So there's no rule about how long you have to wait to go back into an area, and the stand we made the night before was such a great looking stand. I thought, let's go and make that stand again, because we didn't mess anything up the night before. We didn't educate any coyotes. We didn't shoot any coyotes. There weren't any coyotes that came to the call. So we slipped back down in there. We actually sat in our same little snow holes we dug. The wind was in the perfect direction. I start off the stand with some lucky pecker, nothing. About 4 or 5 minutes in, I switched to some coyote fights, and it's not 2 minutes into the fighting, we spot 2 coyotes making their way down below us, coming through the trees.
Yeah. Get moved, Luke. I lost him.
No, I'm really trying to get Luke a coyote. Josh has already killed his first coyote on this trip ever. Luke, I'm trying to get him his first coyote ever. The coyotes get to the bank of the river and they start fading off to the right. The wind's blowing that way. We have a pretty steep angle down to shoot, and the farther they get to the right, the less chance we're gonna have to get a shot. So Luke and I are trying to coordinate. The one coyote would stop and the other one would go, and then the other one would stop, and we're trying to coordinate with the camera on which coyote we're gonna shoot.
We're gonna kill him right here. Luke, you on him? Ready? Woo. I'm on the left one. The left one, yeah, the left one. Take your time. Woo. Woo. Let him stop. There you go. Woo. 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 Sun, the one in the sun. Woo. Lead one, lead one. Woo, woo, woo. Oh, back one, back one. Woo, 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 woo. Good shot, Luke. This one's going through here.
And finally we get it all lined out, and Luke gets one to stop, and he makes a great shot and kills his first coyote ever.
That was pretty cool. Just had 2 coyotes come in right when he switched up a sound. Geoff was playing, I think, Lucky Pecker initially, and then he switched to fight sound. And those 2 came right away. We knocked one down, one got away, but that was pretty neat. Man, that was awesome. Man, to be able to be up on a vantage point like this and watch them use the edges and watch them use the terrain as they're coming in is really cool to see. They are a smart animal.
Who do you think shot that?
I really hope that was Luke, because that'd be his first ever coyote. That'd be pretty awesome.
Nonetheless, we're back on the board. It was a struggle yesterday. We didn't call in a single coyote all day, and you know, who knows what it was, but we're off to a great start. I'm gonna kill this call down a little bit. Yeah, we're off to a great start now, so you know, it's hard to beat killing a coyote on the first stand. So now we just gotta figure out how we can get all the way to the bottom. Our truck's parked way back up top, so it's gonna be a long drag getting him up, but Luke, first coyote, baby. Nice. Heck yeah.
So this is why I purposely let Luke shoot that coyote. As you can see, it's only 100 yards, but it's about 100 yards straight down this bank too, so he had to earn his first coyote. That's awesome. You're doing great, Luke. Keep it up. You're a third of the way there. So pretty much like the day before, we grind it out. Middle part of the day, we make 4 or 5 more stands. Conditions were really good. We were seeing tracks. We were hearing coyotes howl off in the distance, but for whatever reason, the coyotes just weren't wanting to come to the call. So middle afternoon, Tim ends up having to hit the road home, so we drop him off. Josh and I again make a last minute plan for the final afternoon of the hunt, and he tells me about a run 10, 12 miles away. So we jump in the truck, we head that way. We get there, you know, with just enough light to make the last stand of the day. We specifically got in there a little further than maybe most people would, just so we could be right on the bank of the river. And we had a long stretch of river we could see probably 300 or 400 yards one side. And I thought, you know what, how cool would that be to get a coyote to come down the ice? So once again, I jumped off the bank. I walked clear out onto the river and placed the call. And I got back up on the bank, and we're kind of getting situated. And Luke looks over and says, hey, there's a coyote on the bank down there about 250 yards. And I look down, and sure enough, there's a coyote standing on the bank just looking around. Well, Josh was set up closer to the coyote on the bank, but about 30 yards from us. So he hadn't even got his stick set, his swagger set up. He wasn't ready at all. And I look down, and the coyote comes off the bank and is trotting down across the river. Well, about that time, I get the revolt fired up and hit the call, and that coyote stops mid-stride, right middle of the ice in the river, kind of takes a look at us, and sure enough, here it comes right down the ice.
Kill him, Josh. When he gets to the call, kill him. Kill him when he gets to the call.
So the coyote is coming down the river like it read the script. It gets to about 75 yards, and I bumped my remote, and a different sound went off, and the coyote kind of checked up for a minute. And I'm thinking, dang it, man, I just screwed this up, because I really thought this coyote was gonna come right to the call. So I switched back to the sound I was at. The coyote was still interested, but he had changed, his demeanor had definitely changed a little bit. He continues in just a little bit, and he gets to about 50 yards, and he starts looking around, and the damnedest thing happens. The coyote just sits down right in front of us on the river bottom there. And we're kind of looking at each other, wondering, you know, what's going on here? There's some coyotes howling off in the distance, and the coyote kind of looks over there, and we're debating what to do. And I was just getting ready to whisper over to Josh to tell him, hey, let's just wait a minute. There's nowhere that this coyote can go without us, you know, it can't get away at this point without us getting a shot. Let's just keep calling, and maybe we'll call in a second coyote. And about that time, the dang coyote lays down. It's laying there just looking up at us, looking around at 50 yards. And, you know, none of us had ever seen anything like this before. We're kind of giggling and wondering what in the heck this coyote's thinking. And so I start running through some coyote fights and different sounds, trying to maybe draw in a second coyote for us to get a double. And after about 3 minutes, I think, you know what, no other coyotes are coming. So I told Josh to go ahead and take the shot. And he, you know, probably the only time in history he's going to have a chest-on laying down shot at 50 yards at a coyote. But he hit the coyote kind of right in the chest, and it kind of jumped up and spun a little bit. It was a dead coyote run, and it went a little ways down the riverbank and piled up in the snow. But just an amazing last stand to cap off a great hunt.